After more than 2 decades in technology leadership, I learned something interesting. Every complex system starts with the right problem statement. If the problem is wrong, the entire solution becomes fragile. Yet when it comes to retirement planning, most people start with a question that might not be the right one. How big should my corpus be? 3 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, the number keeps changing depending on who you ask. But here is the question I started asking after stepping away from my corporate career: what actually funds your life after work stops? Because retirement is not just a number sitting in a brokerage account, it is something far more practical: cash flow, money entering your bank account, month after month, year after year. So today, I want to explore an idea with you, not as financial advice, but as a system design discussion, a framework called the income first model. Most retirement planning models follow a familiar structure. You accumulate wealth during your working years, then during retirement, you gradually withdraw from that wealth. The most famous example is the 4% rule, derived from the Trinity study. If your annual expenses are 12 Indian rupees lakh, you need around 3 Indian rupees crore invested, withdraw 4% every year, and theoretically, the portfolio should last decades. But this approach quietly assumes something important. It assumes that markets cooperate with your retirement timeline. What if the market crashes early in retirement? What if inflation is higher than expected? What if your expenses change? Suddenly retirement planning becomes a constant balancing act between market returns and withdrawals, which leads to a deeper question: is there another way to design the system? In technology architecture, when a system behaves unpredictably, we often redesign it, not by optimizing parameters, but by changing the architecture itself. So let's reframe the retirement problem. Instead of asking, how much money should I accumulate? What if we asked, how can a portfolio generate the income required to run my life? Let's take a simple example. Suppose your expenses are 1 Indian rupee lakh per month. That means your financial system needs to generate roughly 12 Indian rupees lakh per year, not through withdrawals, but through cash flow generating assets, assets that produce income naturally: interest, dividends, distributions. In other words, design retirement not as a pile of money, but as an income-producing machine. Let's design a simple version of this system. Assume a total portfolio of about 3.6 Indian rupees crore, roughly 30 times the annual expense, but instead of keeping everything in market growth assets, we distribute the portfolio into different roles: 1 Indian rupee crore in high-quality bonds and NCDs, 60 Indian rupees lakh in fixed deposits, 1 Indian rupee crore in dividend-paying equities, and another 1 Indian rupee crore in equity mutual funds for long-term growth. Think of this as 4 subsystems in a larger architecture: stable income, safety buffer, growing income, and long-term compounding. Each piece solves a different part of the retirement puzzle. Now let's examine how this portfolio behaves. From 1 Indian rupee crore in bonds, assuming an 8% yield, annual income is roughly 8 Indian rupees lakh. From 60 Indian rupees lakh in fixed deposits at 7%, another 4.2 Indian rupees lakh. Dividend stocks with a yield around 3.5% generate roughly 3.5 Indian rupees lakh. Combined annual income, about 15.7 Indian rupees lakh. Your expenses are 12 Indian rupees lakh, which means there is a surplus of about 3.7 Indian rupees lakh every year. Instead of spending this surplus, it can be reinvested into the equity mutual fund growth portfolio. Which raises an interesting possibility: what if retirement planning could be designed so that income funds the present, while growth prepares for the future? Now let's talk about the fourth component, the 1 Indian rupee crore allocated to equity mutual funds. This portion of the portfolio does not need to generate income immediately. Its role is different. It acts as a long-term compounding engine. Historically, equities in India have delivered roughly 11 to 13% over long periods, at 12% growth. 1 Indian rupee crore could become roughly 3.4 Indian rupees crore in 10 years. And remember, every year, the surplus income from the portfolio can also be invested here, which means the growth engine becomes even more powerful over time. So while income assets are funding your lifestyle, the growth portfolio is quietly building future resilience. Of course, no retirement model is complete without addressing inflation. If expenses grow at around 7% annually, 12 Indian rupees lakh today becomes roughly 22 Indian rupees lakh in 10 years. At some point, the income from bonds, deposits, and dividends may no longer fully cover expenses, but by then, the growth portfolio may have compounded significantly. Which introduces an interesting design principle. Instead of withdrawing from the portfolio every year, what if withdrawals happened only when necessary? Could such a system reduce sequence of returns risk? Could it provide psychological stability, and most importantly, would it make retirement easier to live with? The income-first model is not a perfect answer, and it certainly isn't the only way to design retirement, but it raises an interesting question: what if retirement planning should be approached the same way we design resilient systems, with multiple income sources, buffers, and growth engines running in parallel, instead of relying entirely on market withdrawals? Maybe the real goal isn't just building a larger corpus. Maybe it's building a system that keeps working quietly in the background, a system that pays your bills, handles inflation, and reduces the anxiety that often follows retirement. But I'm curious what you think. Does designing retirement around income instead of withdrawals make sense, or does it introduce new risks we should think about? Let's discuss.